Shalom, everybody. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you back to the Yerash Hebrew Conquest System, where we're covering 16 essential drills. These drills were designed specifically to advance you in your Hebrew learning as fast as possible. Why take 15 or 20 years when you can get the same accomplished in 2 or 3? Yeah, we would welcome you to drill number 11. I already have 10 drills under our belt, and we're going to be moving into a very important topic for Hebrew readers called isolating the root. Isolating the root. I would encourage you to join me in reading the explanation for this particular exercise. It says in point A, you are to attempt to identify all 3 of the root letters of each verb in a verse. So a few things I'd like to say on roots. Hebrew is complicated in some ways, and it is very simple in other ways. One of the ways that's simple is all of the verbs, many of the nouns are based on a 3-lettered root. And so if you can memorize these roots and know what they mean, when a word is conjugated, when it appears in different stems, and it has different pronouns that may be affixed or prefixed onto them, you'll be able to recognize the word. And some of the words can be quite long, but if you can recognize the root, you know the essential meaning behind the word. And then you can determine what other things have changed in terms of the vowel structure, and you can come out with an accurate meaning. You cannot read biblical Hebrew with comprehension if you have a meager understanding of the root system. Just to encourage you, when I was studying Hebrew in the 90s in the Washington, D.C. metro area, there's a Bible school that I was attending, taking Hebrew lessons from Jewish instructors. And what we had to use was BDB, Brown Driver Briggs. And that was like the Bible, for Hebrew students. That's the big, thick, I think it's like 3 inches thick lexicon. Only problem with that lexicon, though, it's an amazing work of scholarship. It's been with us for over 100 years. It is set up in such a way that all of the words are listed by root. And so if you don't know what the root is, or let's say some of the root letters had disappeared, there was no internet to appeal to, look things up in Bible programs. We had to go back and forth through this thick lexicon, trying to guess what the root letter would be. And it was extremely time consuming. It was frustrating. So thankfully, we've got so many useful tools that make the study of Hebrew, I'd say not 100 times easier, probably like 1,000 times easier than it used to be. And so we are tackling one of the most important lessons and topics in the study of the Hebrew language, and that has to do with the root system. I've underlined something here that there are 3 radicals, 3 letters in a root. And B, it says note, the root letters hang out, say, in the middle of verbs, right in the middle. And there are nouns and pronoun suffixes that can be attached either to the beginning of the root or the ends of the root. Some cases, depending on what stem it is in, it'll be an additional letter or more that will change the meaning, intensify the meaning, or make the meaning reflexive. We will be covering the stems in a future lesson, also a very important subject matter. All right, C. Print out the student practice verse and then draw a box around what you perceive to be the 3-lettered root of each verb in the verse. It's a very strategic reason I put this lesson after the lesson that had to do with expanding your vocabulary. So if you listen to what I'm telling you to do and you apply the principles in the order that I give them, you're going to be well equipped to do extremely well on future lessons because you've done all the groundwork. And these have been intentionally ordered, these lessons, in a very strategic way to enhance your learning experience. So line upon line, and you don't want to get the cart before the horse. There's certain things you have to do. So if you don't even know vocabulary well, you're going to have a hard time identifying root letters if you don't know much vocabulary. So it's very important that you continue to add to your repertoire of vocabulary words. You're supposed to be in this exercise taking a sheet that I'm giving you that has a practice verse and then trying your hand at drawing a box around what you perceive to be the root. And it's fine if you get it wrong. You got to start somewhere. But at least I'm going to go through it and I'm going to show you how it should be done correctly so you can go back through the video and get a sense of the correct way of doing it and kind of tweak things where you may have gotten some things wrong. Okay, let's read this word. I know it's a little bit obscured because of the box. La zar cha. Put it together. La zarcha. It means to your seed. So zera is the Hebrew word for seed. And so this is a noun. It's not a verb. It's a noun form. Zera is zayin reish ein. That would be the root here. Let's advance to the next slide. Let's read the instructions on this one. D says to observe when root letters of a particular Hebrew verb may have either assimilated or dropped out, and write the missing letter on your student practice verse sheet above the correct word. You can ignore that typo there. So here I have added a hey because I know that the root word is bet nun hey, bana. Bana is the Hebrew word to build. When it's prefixed with a yod, it means he will build. And there's a conjunction here, an and there's a little construction here called a vav conversive. We won't have the time today to go over a vav conversive, but it's something you will see constantly in biblical Hebrew. And essentially, when something has a vav and it's got a patak and a yod, it's called a vav conversive, and it actually reverses the tense. It just flips it. So without the vav conversive, it would just be he will build. With the vav conversive, it changes the tense to and he built. And he built, and it's a reference to Abraham, Avram, building an altar to the Lord. So being new to biblical Hebrew, it's going to take you some time. First, you're going to learn vocabulary words. And once you've learned the vocabulary words for a particular verse, you'll be equipped to do this lesson. And so there's a very strategic reason why I've put the lessons in the order that they're in, and I would ask you to stick to the order because it will help you. And if you start jumping all over the place, you'll probably be like, I totally don't get it, I'm lost, and you won't understand because you're doing it out of order. The roots, memorizing roots, I told you to take your index cards and make vocabulary cards, and you're going to put the three-lettered root of every verb. Many nouns have a three-lettered root as well. Onto the card, you're going to memorize them. And you would know from this particular verse that this word appears and that the root word is really bana. It's bet nun hey. Bet nun hey. Now the hey has dropped out. It's considered a weak radical. Some letters are considered weak in Hebrew. Hey is one of those. And so it's not that unusual for a hey to go missing, basically. But if you didn't know that, you'd be like, really looks like the Hebrew word for son, ben. Yeah, but the context would tell you it's not ben. And if you had taken the time to make your vocabulary cards, you would have seen what the root is in blueletterbible.org, and then you would know from that. And so that's an important crutch. We're going to be using blueletterbible.org quite a bit. And the beautiful thing is that with a program like that, like when I was young learning Hebrew in the 90s, there's no internet. We didn't have Bible programs. All this automated stuff we have today is amazing. We had a thick 3-inch thick lexicon called BDB, and everything was listed in Hebrew only, and it was by root. And you had to know what the root was in order to look it up. I mean, even if you knew what the root was, it was a chore just to look up a word and find the exact page, and the entry for what you're looking for was a huge chore. But what if a letter like hey had dropped out and you didn't even know it? Well, you could be looking for 20 minutes, to find one root, one word and its definition. And so it was incredibly frustrating. I think that's one of the reasons why so many people, when I was younger, just dropped out. It's like, this is too hard. This is not worth my time. It's too aggravating. So we can be really thankful for all of the amazing tools that men and women have developed to help us in our quest to master the Hebrew language. So we're going to be talking more about blueletterbible.org for this particular assignment that we're on, but let's advance to the next slide. Okay, isolating the root. So this is me doing your homework assignment for you. And it's important that you get a good sense of how to do this assignment, not just like one example. That is not enough. The instructions were to print out your verse and take a colored pen and then to draw a box around whatever we perceive to be the possible root. And it's fine if you get it wrong. You're going to find out by checking things in Blue Letter Bible that are mistakes that you've made. I still make mistakes. And like this word here, there's a red box around that, but that is actually in error, as I'm looking at it. And this hey is part of the root. So the root resh, aleph, hey, those letters, resh, aleph, hey, that's the root of, it's the Hebrew root to see. And so there are many Hebrew words that have the radicals yod, resh, aleph. And that's the root to fear. It's easy to get that confused. So let's just review the verse as we have it here. Vayera, vayera. So I'm actually going to pause right now, and we are going to jump over to blueletterbible.com and look up Genesis 12:7. Okay, Genesis 12:7. Show you how fast and easy this is. Adjust the window, hit the tools, cantorial markings. Right, so that's the verse. And right here, every word that is represented in this pasuk, in this verse, it appears in single file, vertically, immediately beneath. So we can see here that the point I was making is correct, that the Hebrew word to see, you look at the word here as it appears in the text, the hey has dropped off as a weak radical. And really, technically, I should have drawn the box like this. So I will chalk that up to either I was in a hurry or a graphic design error, because I do know the word, vayira. So we have the prefix yud, meaning he will see. And then the vav conversive, and he saw. And he saw. Okay, let's go back to our layout. Okay, this next one here is the Hebrew word to say. Amar. Amar occurs thousands of times in Tanakh, so it's definitely a word you want to know. And again, if you've done the exercise and followed the steps, you already would know that. You would have already built up your vocabulary by making cards on most of the words that are on this page, and you had committed them to memory so that when you see it, you're like, oh yeah, of course, yeah, that's the root for it means to say. All right, here we have Lazeracha. Okay, that's one in the first example that I gave you, so that should sound familiar and look familiar. Lazeracha. And so the root is zera, and that is the word that means seed, zera. Okay, next box we have, this Hebrew word is pronounced attain. Attain. It means I will give. I will give. So here we have a letter nun in blue, indicating that nun has dropped out, and it hasn't really dropped out in so much it's been assimilated. So nun, you need to know, it's the only letter in the alphabet that has properties of instability in that it assimilates. It's absorbed many times into the letter that comes immediately after it. And so in this case, we have a tav that comes after it right here, a tav. And the nun has assimilated in part of the digesh. The reason there's a digesh here, some grammarians would call that a footprint digesh. It's like a little vestige of, it's like a little footprint that, hey, someone was here. The nun was here. Instead of completely disappearing, it left a little tiny footprint. to remind you that it used to exist. And if you knew the root of this from your vocabulary card assignment, you'd know that this is the Hebrew word natan, nun, tav, nun sofit, natan. And I memorized that when I was like 22, 23 years old. And I remember the definition: give, deliver, set, permit. So it can have a variety of meanings, and many of these words can. And that's one thing that can be challenging to the new student is, okay, I can deal with one definition, but don't give me like 4, 5, 6, 8 definitions for a word. That gets really challenging. But I happen to remember after all these years: give, deliver, set, permit. Those were the definitions given in my first year Hebrew grammar. So let's go back to the Bible program. Okay, scrolling down here. Okay, there's lazaracha. Lazaracha, attain. So that is verification that what I'm telling you is true. The root of this letter is nun, tav, nun sofit, natan. Natan is the lexical form. If you see something that has a kametz, a patach, it's called the lexical form. That's the way it appears when you look up a Hebrew word in the lexicon. Even though these vowels can be altered under all kinds of different ways that this verb can be conjugated, can be affected by things, the meaning can change. So a 10 is I will give. I will give. So when you have an aleph appended onto the front of the root, incomplete action. I will do something. So I will give. Here God is making a promise. He's going to give some things to Avram. Okay, back to the assignment. Okay, we've already dealt with this word. We won't cover that again, and we just have a couple left. This is the word for altar. Hebrew language altar is mizbeach. Mizbeach. And that's a good example that many nouns have a verbal root. Because it's an action language, the verb is extremely prominent in biblical Hebrew, and you want to understand that. So this word mizbeach, meaning altar, the root of it is a 3-lettered root, zayin, bet, chet. And the verbal form of that root, zavach, is the verb to sacrifice, to slaughter something and sacrifice. So it's just enlightening that that verbal root would be at the heart of the noun form of the word for altar. You see that? Beautiful connections in Hebrew. You just simply cannot get these in the English language, and you will be greatly blessed and encouraged many, many times if you stick with your goal to learn to read biblical Hebrew with comprehension. You'll begin to find nuggets all over the place the more that you learn. All right, finally, we've got hanireh, hanireh. So again, this is the word to see, and it has this sense of God appearing to Abraham. He's the one who appeared to Abraham, and so the nun, no doubt, is a nephal. It's a nephal verb form, and that can be passive. It can at times be reflexive. In this case, if we back it up a little bit, attain, I will give, et haaretz, the land, hazot, this land, vayiven sham, and he built, sham is there, mizbeach, he built there an altar, ladonai, to the Lord, hanireh elav, meaning the Lord, the one who appeared, elav, to him, to Avram. Okay, last screen. I've already spent a little bit of time on blueletterbible.org, and I just have here that it requires one click of the mouse to locate the root. One click. So I want you to remind yourself of that and encourage yourself in that it's not like it was when I was just starting out, where I had a 3-inch thick BDB lexicon. I'll show that to you one of these days. And that, wasting sometimes 15, 20 minutes just trying to find one word, sometimes giving up. I just can't find it. So you stand in a much better place, having the actual root of words one click away. Crazy. Tremendous blessing. All right, so let's just review how to find your root. And go back up here, type in blueletterbible.org, come to the search block. You want to click with your cursor there and just type in the reference, Genesis 12. We've been studying Pasuk 7. The verses come up. You click on Tools. That will give you the quickest access to the Hebrew. I like to click on this box because it puts the cantillation marks in there. Not that we're going to be singing it right now, but cantillation marks also serve as enunciation marks and tell you where to stress the words. If you scroll down on this page, literally these are all of the roots. It just lays them all out one after another. And so if you have any question on your assignment where you're not sure what the root is, this should be your first place that you'll go. It'll be resolved, and then once you know what the root is, you know exactly what part of that word to put into a red box. And the hey, obviously, in the example we were looking at was missing. It dropped off. So instead of adding the hey, which is not even there, you simply put the box around the two letters. And whenever you have a box around two letters and you're dealing with a verb or a noun, you know something's up. You know, there's a root letter that's missing. And blueletterbible.org will tell you exactly what's missing. So let's go back one last time, back things up to the beginning of this lesson. Lesson 11 is called Isolating the Root. You are to attempt to identify all three of the root letters of each verb in a verse. That's an attempt. You may not be able to identify all three just because there may be missing some, or you may be confused. You may not even know, like, what are the root letters. You could be in confusion. So that's another reason you may fail in your attempt, and that's fine. You know, we fall down, we get up, we fall down, we get up, and eventually we stay up. And I stress that the root letters hang out in the middle. So more times than not, now you won't always have things on both sides, but many times you will. And if there's nothing on front of the verb or after the verb, then that's a sure sign that it's a verb that's in the kal stem, meaning the most basic stem or binyan of the verb. So it's just going to carry the simple meaning. Now, if this was a verb, let's just say, you know, I think zera can also, there may in fact be a verb form meaning to, like, to plant. Let's just say that's the case. I could be wrong, but let's say that's the case. And it's he planted. Zera would be he planted or even he harvested. I'm pretty sure that is a verb form, actually. And so we are putting a red box around that. You're going to print out the student practice verse. That's what you're going to be doing your homework on. Taking your practice sheet in hand and having blueletterbible.org open, you're going to observe when the root letters of a particular Hebrew verb have either assimilated. We covered the nun. It's the one letter that is absorbed at times into the letter after it. It is assimilated. And then other letters that drop out. And we're going to write the letter, and that's what the blue is about. I wrote it in blue just so it'd stand out what letter is missing. Sometimes letters can drop off on the end like a hey, and if there's a letter in the middle of a word, such as a vav, a yod, these are weak, and oftentimes when the verb is conjugated, they go missing. They just disappear, and so you need to pay particular attention when you're doing your vocabulary cards and you're ever putting down a word, writing a word on a vocabulary card that has a hey on the end, or let's say a vav or a yud in the middle. Then these are weak, and expect strange things to happen to weak words. So I will put the cap on it. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. You may want to review this again if you're unclear on anything. And I will meet you in the next exercise. Shalom, shalom, Erev Tov.